so the meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function, instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. That's everybody online there. How many have we got there? Lots. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. The other item now, apologies. Chris, do we have any apologies for this afternoon's meeting, please?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors John James, Mark Jones and Ronald Burnett.
Anybody else have apologies from you who Chris hasn't been informed of? Right, thank you. Then our other favourite topic, item number 2, declarations of interest. Rebecca, can you please take us through declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. I don't anticipate, members, that any of you will have declarations to make on this particular item that you're scrutinising today, but if you do have any declarations throughout discussions, just raise your hand and notify us. Thank you.
Any comments? No. Good. Right. Item number 3, confirmation minutes of the 21st of the 7th, 2022. Just to remind members that the minutes of our previous scrutiny was looking at the first draft evidence gathering exercise in relation to the Council self-assessment report. Members, do you approve these minutes? They're on the... I've got a copy of them here. Does everybody agree? Everybody online okay with that? Good. So I have a second, somebody to move and second. David? I've got people to change this. And Nick. Thank you. Right, next item on the agenda is the action sheet. Would you like to go through that, please, Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair. So, members, as you will see from the action sheet, they are all historical actions relating to previous committees. They have all been responded to now, so with your agreement, we'll remove those from the action sheet going forward. Thank you.
Thank you there. Any comments at all before I move on? That's good. Right. I'm trying to get my computer to function here at the moment. Not being too happy. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the county plans. Right, members, as you're aware, that we're here today to discuss the development process of the county plan 22-27 and to scrutinise the draft plan. Can I first welcome Leader? Is the Leader here?
Yes.
Oh, hello, Leader. Sorry, I didn't see you down there. I've got my short-range glasses on. I do go for those. First, welcome the Leader and the Chief Officers. Hand over to the Leader to introduce the report. Here you are, Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stuart. Hello. I hope this is the start, really, of what can be a really positive and productive input from scrutiny. And I think an example of best practice in scrutinising things before they're done, as opposed to after they're done. Can I thank officers for their work so far? Translating initial member thoughts into the draft paper that you see before you today. I think it's been a really good example of officers working across the council. So thank you to all of them and to Comms for their work on this too. Just maybe outline a few things that are key for me in setting a new plan before handing over to others to talk further about some of the detail. There's a number of things that are key to me, and they're probably most succinctly outlined on page 7 of the document, the page entitled Priorities for 2022 to 27. For me, I think it's key, as we put another plan together, that the plan we put together sets out the how and the why, as well as the what. It's a rounded plan, talking about how we're going to work, and why we feel those are the best ways to work, rather than just simply stating what our priorities are. Secondly, I think it's important that it's a community-focused plan, a community plan, a plan for place, not just a corporate plan about what we will do as an organisation in isolation from our community and our partners. I think that's key as well. Thirdly, I think it's key that it builds on and also ties in with the 7 wellbeing goals and the 5 ways of working in the Welfare of Future Generations Act. And I think the structure really ties those things together really well. I think it's vital that we don't have a plan that sits or is structured in isolation from that guiding bit of work that is a real opportunity for us setting a plan as a council to think of the long term and think about how we work. Those ways of working, integration, prevention, collaboration, long-term involvement should be, through everything that we do, I know it's a cliche, like a stick of rock. I think it's key that our plan is formulated in that way, also taking into account those 7 wellbeing goals and how we can contribute to all of them. I'm also drawn to the 8 characteristics of an outstanding council. I think those should focus our thinking and focus everything we do. They are, by their nature, very much cross-cutting. I think that is important, and it's not just a case of silo working to different priorities. We've seen, I think, with the strides forward we've made in areas like children's services, the huge benefit of the whole council pushing together on a challenge, and I think that's something that can signpost our way forward in how we can work over the next 5 years. I also point out that the core values that are mentioned there are fair, effective, supportive, innovative, if I can say them. And I think those are things that we should reflect on as we set this plan, as well as we set our aspirations for the next 5 years. I think, if I'm frank, we are better at some of them than we are at others. We have been better at some of them than we have been at others. I think how we work to make sure we hit the target of all those four values are important, and how we build on the culture we have as a council, how we drive improvement, how we drive innovation, how we drive transformation where that's needed, whilst also not losing the supportive culture within this council. I don't think we're a council that seeks to play a blame game. We're not a council that seeks to have a go at each other. But at the same time, we need to drive forward those performance goals as well in a supportive way that enables members of staff to really feel empowered to deliver improvement and gives them the space to deliver improvement too. I think our plan has to be realistic and deliverable. Choices are inevitable in any context. We can't prioritise everything, otherwise we end up prioritising nothing. And I know to members who have been here longer, I often sound like a stuck record when I'm saying that, but I think the temptation too much is to sort of just say, yeah, of course we prioritise everything. But if you do that, you end up prioritising nothing. So realistic and deliverable, especially within what looks to be an increasingly challenging resource situation for all public services, I think is going to be the important. That's the sharp-edged end of that prioritisation conversation. We all love to say the bits of the work that we do that are important to us. It's much harder to talk about the so what question of what do we have to say is a lesser priority as a consequence. I think it's key that this plan speaks to the challenges and opportunities we have as an area, as a council, and is ambitious. I think realism is one thing, but that shouldn't restrict our ability to be ambitious in what we want to do and the changes we want to make for our area. I'm really pleased to see the commitment in here to regular reporting back. I think quarterly reporting back is the plan, and I think that will be a real bonus as we see how the plan is being delivered. It doesn't just sit on the shelf and go dusty, that we actually report back on a regular basis about what we're doing as a council, how we're doing it, and how we're making progress. I think one of the slides about what we've done in the last year sort of really brings that to life. The other thing I think that particular part of the plan as it stands brings to life is how wide the work that we do as a council is. Quite often a lot of our discussions around the very visible services that we deliver, inevitably neighbourhood services, but of course there are other services that we have to take note of that are more in the background. Services like public health, public protection, for example, that before the pandemic would have been seen as perhaps back office functions, but during the pandemic we all saw how vital they were in taking things forward. In the case of Wales, in running our test and trace programme for one, a great saving to the taxpayer as well as providing a better service. So I think how we make sure that everything we do is cross-cutting and also takes into account the services that maybe have service users who don't have the loudest voices themselves to shout. We think of children's services, some of our vulnerable children. They can't shout and scream. It's our job to be their voice, to make sure that the services they rely on and that have a big impact on their lives are protected, as well as the services that maybe attract a little bit more vocal attention. Lastly, I just want to say something about member input in this. I see this very much as a working document. It's an iterative process. If you have ideas, please feel free to have that dialogue with officers and with myself. I don't think we don't think we've got all the answers. We're more than happy to take on board suggestions of how we shape this document and what's in it. So that really is a genuine sort of open door conversation there. I hope we can have as we move forward and as this plan takes shape. So thank you for inviting me along today. I'm pleased to introduce what I think is a really outstanding bit of work looking forward about what we want to do and how we want Torvine to be in 5 years' time.
Thank you very much, Leader, for that summary. Now, can I ask the Chief Executive to ask to the comments from the Leader regarding the development process of the county plan and provide an overview of the information contained within it? Thank you, Chief Executive.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, all. So obviously the county plan sets out the ambition, the aspiration, some key priorities for the county over the life of the current administration. That actually sets us up for beyond that to some degree. Now, quite deliberately, the plan at the front end of this document that we've put before you is not a definitive blueprint of the work. It's actually a framework within which our plans can be delivered. We can change, and change can be encouraged and directed and responded to. In order to promote better collaboration, better partnership and integration, 4 themes frame the plan. They are connectivity, well-being, sustainability, identity and culture. That will assist us in focusing our activity always around the big picture and the vision for the county, which is why we've themed the plan in this particular way. Just wanted to reflect briefly on the way that we've gone about developing this. It really is important to recognise that we've taken into consideration a range of local, regional and national drivers, including, for example, the views of public through primary and secondary engagement in all of the work that we do, existing commitments, of course, from the council, our responsibilities, including statutory functions, our duties, and our commitment to existing strategies. Of course, the manifesto commitments made by our current administration, regionally commitments linked to the Gwent Public Service Board Wellbeing Plan, and our ambition at some point to potentially become a Marmot region, national requirements and commitments, for example, as the leaders just alluded to, around the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. So the document actually is probably best read in as 2 separate documents. That's what it is. There is the county plan that sits at the front of the document that's been shared. That element sets out the scene, the challenges, and the longer-term plans for Torvine, along with 9 overarching wellbeing objectives, which will aim to drive transformation and improvement for our services and also making that difference for our residents. But also, the second part is an annual delivery plan, and that annual plan will be reviewed and updated each year, with the outcomes that we've achieved and the plans that we've got for the coming year. And as the leader has just alluded to there, we'll be monitoring that activity on a quarterly basis throughout the year too. So the plan is still in development. There have been several additions since we were since we shared the plan with yourselves. That won't detract from the conversation today at all, but the plan is obviously developing daily. So I've asked Nigel to come along, representatives from each of the directorates, so that we're here to answer your questions, gladly receive your views on the approach that we've taken to delivering the plan, your views on the 9 wellbeing objectives, any obvious gaps that you might recognise, and your recommendations as to how we can take things forward. So we're welcome to open that up to the floor, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much, Stephen. What I've been indicated and the way we're going to approach this, Stephen's rather indicated it here, is that we're going to do a 20-minute general questions, which is obviously to some extent the plan itself and the general questions. That you can ask questions about what it is, the process, as it were. And I sort of take the hints from what you just said there, and it's on my crib sheet. And then 50 minutes going through the headings. I would like to introduce the officers here, because not everybody knows them. I know we've got new councillors, and you're not all familiar with them. Some of us are. But so, gentlemen and ladies, could you introduce yourselves and what you do, because it's important. I don't think everybody's familiar with you. So we start down that end and work your way round. Yeah, please do.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. I'm Dermot Crystal. I'm Chief Education Officer and Lead Director for Children and Young People, as well as education. I have responsibility for our relationship with the Leisure Trust, and also have leisure, sports and play within my portfolio.
I'm Jason O'Brien. I'm the Chief Officer for Social Care and Housing.
Hi, Rachel Jarrett, Chief Officer, Neighbourhood Planning and Public Protection.
Can you put yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen Vickers, Chief Executive Officer for Torvine Council.
Nigel Aurelius, Assistant Chief Executive, Resources. Neil Jones, Head of Communications, Public Engagement and Civil Contingencies.
I'm Linda Puddy, Head of PSSU.
Okay.
Thank you, Member. So just to clarify, as the Chair has already mentioned, for the first 20 minutes, if you could just focus your question on the development of the plan and the process that was gone through in bringing you today that plan. And then once you've finished with those questions, you can move on to the actual content and going through each of the wellbeing objectives then. Thank you.
Invite questions from on screen, from internet, and from those in the chamber. We have about 5 people in the chamber. So, Councillor Evans. Rose, come on then, will you, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a few pointers on the first real page, really, the place. And I'm hoping my comments will improve. It's not about being parochial or what have you, but there is a typo on page 31. There's a word missing with the majestic beauty, so that can be picked up just as a typo. But my view is about the place, really. We've got moving south. We have a lovely paragraph about Llanabon and its population of 6,055 out of a population of 91,000 of the whole of Torvine. Then we go on to visit the museum, park, historic town of Pontypool, the beautiful Mon and Brecon Canal, Cumbran, you can visit the community farm or the shopping complex. So my point is, we've mentioned in previous meetings about telling our story, blowing our own trumpet, whatever you want to call it. But what about the rest of the borough? We have 3 distinct communities coming down the valley, urban and rural. The British, the biodiversity at Blansack Country Park, the jewel in the crown of Pontypool Park. Brecon Beacons also runs along the Lasgarn and down over Pennygarn and into New Inn. We have Blaen Bran, we have Tiglas Adolan, we have the Boating Lake, the Mill, the Anllywyd and the New Grange Hospital, Cwmbran Stadium and the historic area of Tumbalan. I think that introduction to this is our place needs to be more selling of the borough rather than just a lovely paragraph on Blanavon and then you can visit this or this for the rest of the borough. That's just my view. Not saying we should include it all, and I probably missed a few, but we're talking about connectivity, identity and culture. With the greatest respect, the majority of our residents do not live in Blanavon, but we are talking about connecting people within their communities and enabling a sense of belonging. We do not even recognise this at their communities in the introduction to our county plan, so I think that really needs a bit of improvement.
So you're absolutely right. Thank you for that, Councillor Seaborn. I think it's fair to say, and probably what I should have said in the introduction, there are some areas of this plan that are clearly require considerable improvement, and you've just highlighted one. There are other areas in the plan that similarly are underdeveloped and were still being worked on. But I think you're absolutely right. It is important that we sell our place in the way that you've just described, and it's important that it's reflective of the whole of the county. So I think really helpful that you've made those comments today. Any views that you can share on that, including actually some of the narrative and content that you can help with, would be absolutely most welcome. To be fair, this section, if we're going to be really honest, we sort of lifted and shifted this section from when we were working on some, I think it was a recruitment advertising that we did. So it is not actually an area that we've yet developed, but you've just pointed out some fantastic areas that we'd be really pleased to include. So thank you for that.
Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I think you probably covered part of it. With our development process, what's our baseline and what we're starting from? And are we going to further measure it? And the second part of that, with the 9 recommendations, a lot of them are going to be interlinked with each other. And are we going to cope with them recommendations if that happens?
Yeah, so quite clearly, as I said in the introduction, actually, Councillor Evans, we don't start from ground zero. No plan does, no council does. So it is really important to reflect the work that is ongoing. Where there is baseline data, that's exactly what we'll be doing. We'll be benchmarking each line against that. We'll continue to try to develop a better picture from a data perspective of what's going on across the county, and indeed so that we can measure some of our improvements. That's not always as simple as it sounds. There are some difficulties with data production, some of which needs developing locally, some of which actually is limited by what we can gain nationally. But you're absolutely right, that will always be part of it. And part of actually the way that we've approached this, if you look at the second part of the plan, is we're very reflective upon that we've done last year, what we've already delivered, and that we're promising to deliver, because we really want to be held to account for what it is that we're promising to deliver. But we do need that baseline of data. What was the second point, Councillor?
Out of the 9 recommendations, yeah, a lot of them are going to be interlinked.
Yeah.
And how will we deal with that interlink?
Well, I think, so they are, and actually they should be. And one of the risks that you always run, and I think one of the risks that we've run in the past, and this is not a criticism of the approach of the past, but it certainly is a risk of the way that practice manifested itself. We had three priorities under the current plan. And those priorities, if you read them, they could easily be interpreted as priority for education, priority for neighbourhoods, and a priority for social care. Yeah. When in actual fact, they're not. They're council priorities overall. This plan has been deliberately written in a way, as of the 9 priorities, and actually the framing of this around those 4 themes has been deliberately written in a way to ensure that we've got directorates, the 4 directorates, and all of the support services within the council focusing on the same objectives. So you'll see within the delivery plan that it's not just, if we're talking about the place or we're talking about communities, it's not a list from Dave Leach and the Communities Directorate. It's actually Rachel's and neighbourhoods have got things in there. Our education system has got stuff in there, social care has. So I think the type of cross-pollination that you're talking about across those wellbeing objectives is actually something that we've designed the plan to try to do to ensure that actually we're all working and focusing on the right things for the county. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. When you read through this, it'd be very easy, wouldn't it, for us to say, why have you put that under Objective 2 and not under Objective 1? When we talk about improving educational attainment, and then we also talk about championing children, young people and families, of course there is going to be overlap between the two. But actually, that's okay. What matters is the activity that sits underneath those objectives. And obviously then you're right to point out the way that we deliver it and we hold ourselves to account for ensuring that we're moving forward. So I hope that assures you, Councillor, in that way.
Councillor David Williams.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Just picking up the point that my colleague made earlier, Councillor Seaborn, I think this is obviously a good opportunity to highlight and connect to the destination Torvine work that has been happening. We spoke in Council this morning about the connectivity and not looking at things in isolation, and I think this is a good opportunity to do that. That's observation one. Second thing, and again, this may be a deliberate pattern, but I think it does lend itself to the fact of our cross-cutting scrutinies that are not tied to department to also take a scrutiny role for the different elements of the plan under those 9 key priorities. So I think we need to be thinking of that scrutiny process as we take this forward, because I think we have an opportunity to do that. And my third point is, I think you mentioned in your introduction, Chief Executive, the importance of engaging with others. So I would highlight the need for the early engagement with the community councils, particularly in relation to the culture and heritage theme as to what is important in communities. Thank you.
Anybody comment on that one? Stephen, any of the rest of you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can respond. I'd agree on all 3 points. I think on the final point, we have already set up a process, an all-members session to go through the plan. Obviously, naturally, after this has been through its next iteration, including the scrutiny recommendations, it may well be that we can think how we best connect community councils into some of that work, or we roll out the same process for community councils. You're right, though, it's a good point. We'll take that on board.
Thank you for that one. I've now got Councillor Janet Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I was only going to reiterate what Councillor Williams said. It was something that we brought up in Council this morning about connectivity throughout the borough. And I'm really glad to see, reading later on in the report, that culture and our heritage are equally as important as everything else we do. We need to sell Torvine, and it's the only way we're going to do it, and linking up on what we're doing and what we're doing well.
Do we have any response there, or should I go on to the next one?
I think we just agree with everything that was said.
This seems to be a theme in here at the moment. Okay, Colette Thomas, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know how we consulted with our communities and how we intend to consult with them in the second phase of the secondary involvement, please.
Yeah, so I think the best way to look at it, we in terms of the physical plan itself, we've not taken the plan out to communities. What we have done, though, naturally, is taken into account an ongoing dialogue that we have with communities across a whole range of service areas, service delivery, policy and strategy setting. So that, as well as, of course, taking into account what our communities did in respect of our recent local elections and the manifesto of the current administration. So there is a range of mechanisms by which we are listening to communities, albeit that it isn't actually presenting this plan to them in that way, as a sort of a document to scrutinise in the same way that we are with you here. What we've tried to do is take into account everything that we are committed to, everything we have a statutory obligation to deliver against, and that we hear communities talking to us on a daily basis as to what their priorities are. And of course, importantly, because it's important that we are a data-driven authority, that we know about our place in terms of areas where we can recognise that the county needs to make improvements. So there's a range of ways that we listen to communities. I think it's more sophisticated than simply rolling out this document in that sense. But again, happy to listen to recommendations as to how we can continue to develop and improve that.
Colette, do you want to come back?
I just wanted to be sure that we have all sort of areas of our communities, our older people and perhaps our younger residents are involved and fully engaged in the plan as well in time.
Yes, and certainly they absolutely will be. It's a great point. They absolutely will be in terms of the annual planning process that we go through and the actual delivery process that we go through. And again, if there are obvious areas that you don't feel that we are well enough developed in respect of asking those questions and telling those stories and supporting our residents in a way that satisfies you, I think it's a great opportunity for you to make those recommendations. The only thing I would say is I think we have to be quite clear. At the front of the latest iteration of the plan, which I'm really sorry that you don't have in front of you, but I do, are 9 wellbeing objectives that sets out by 2027 we will, is a much more developed part of the document now. Unfortunately, because of us having to publish papers a week ago in order for scrutiny to receive them, you don't have that, but there's a lot of work. But what I can do, couldn't share it for this document, for this meeting. I did ask if we could, but we couldn't share it today. But what we will do as part of, immediately after the meeting, we can share the latest iteration of the plan with scrutiny, so that at least all the framing of any future conversation is at least as up to date as it possibly can. And we'll also make sure that as we make further changes to the plan, we'll keep updating you if that's something that scrutiny members would like to receive.
Chair, I think we've lost connection with people at home a second.
Can we pause the meeting for a moment? Horrible noise. Who's going at the moment?
Can I just finish one more point? Somebody just reminded me. We also, by the way, just to answer the previous question around participation and listening to our residents, we do have a participation strategy which is due, I think, for sign-off at the end of October, I think, Neil. And again, we'll make sure that that's shared to scrutiny members so that you can see at least our approach to wider participation with the council and beyond. So we'll share that also.
Councillor Rosemary-Seaborn.
Thanks very much, Chair. Taking your point on cross-pollination, I think that's really good. The silo mentality isn't good for a council. We're all one, and we're all contributing to the same aim, and that's for our residents. So I tick that box there with that. And the consulting with communities, I think they need to be part of this ongoing process as well. My one question is, are we or have we set the baselines for 2022 so that when we're looking at monitoring, can we, just take the looked after children. We had a report this morning from Jason. Now, in the monitoring sessions that are planned, do we look at those baselines so that we can take those forward and look that we're improving or not? whatever?
I think the answer is yes. In some lines of activity, there'll be clear baseline reporting and there'll be clear delivery and activity that can be reported against that baseline. In some circumstances, this will be new activity and we'll be counting that too. But it's not just about counting the numbers. It's also about considering the impact that it's having and the difference that it's making for our residents. So again, we'll also be reporting back on that.
David?
Thank you, Chair. Two very small points, building on points that colleagues have raised. One is, I think that there's a real opportunity here, and it's really important, I think, to get the young people's voice in here, so our young people's panel, and perhaps then allude to that in the plan, the fact that it has gone through that process, I think will be very helpful, because it demonstrates that future, that future generation look. There's an email. Sorry for the disturbance, everybody. And secondly, again, admittedly it's fairly topical, but I think within that whole realm of sustainability, it's helpful to consider energy. It is there in detail in number 61, I think. You make some reference to energy elements, but I think it might be useful at the front end as well. Thank you.
I wanted to put observation in as well, because what appears to be obvious is how you get issues, statutory responsibility, the whole lot into this process, because it's obviously emerging issues. Pandemic was a good one. There was concern about nature. There was concern about issues, as a result of this. And some even emerge from our constituents, residents, about all sorts of things we might not have considered as a council. And it's how it gets into the system. And I think what I'm seeing here, what I'm hearing here, is how we feed it in. It might not be something officers even think. I mean, members of the public going on about the canal was an interesting example. That suddenly became a big issue. I mean, some of us have been on about things like that for years, but climate change is another one. It's how you feed all this into the system, how it has relevance. I think you've picked up on it pretty well in respect of that. I just, how you get that into the system, it becomes priority or something you put time and effort into. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, Councillor. The reason that I set out at the beginning and mentioned actually in the narrative that it's a blueprint for our work, it's because we have to be able to re-baseline our priorities as times go on throughout the year. We couldn't predict the pandemic. It's a great example. But the good thing about these, or what we believe we've come up with in terms of the set of wellbeing objectives, and we've worked really hard on these, let's not forget, with Cabinet. We've not done these in isolation. These wellbeing objectives, we think, have resilience to whatever work, or actually should be a focus of any work that we do. The fact that that work might reprioritise itself around, goodness forbid, a new pandemic or new set of priorities, a new set of financial challenges. Yeah. It won't change in terms of our overall aspirations in terms of our wellbeing objectives. What it might change is the programmes of work that sit under it. And so what you'll see, that's the reason why we've got the front end as a blueprint and then annual delivery plans that will most definitely look different year on year. But you'll see 4 or 5 of those, or 5 of them throughout the life of this plan, that will be very much more responsive to those year-on-year pressures.
Thank you. I've got a few more minutes here before we go over to Stephen.
Something just what the Chief Executive said. I mean, we're doing a lot of good things, but like I said on the previous things, we don't promote ourselves very good. Looking at that, what we've actually achieved during 21-22, that should be put out there, because that is really, really interesting. People need to look at that. We don't just empty the bins. We do a lot more besides, because people don't see that bit. And I think it's vitally important we put that out there so people can see that we're actually doing what we say we're doing. I think that's vitally important we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and it comes back to Councillor C's point about ensuring that we're promoting this right from the front of this document right the way through. It is very easy to get drawn into, and I know this. A lot of the news that hits my desk, you can imagine, it is not necessarily all the good things that the council are doing, but it's really important that you keep a baseline as to actually the fantastic work that we do. Millions, of interactions and services, services delivered, thousands of services delivered across our county. A majority of which we do really, really well. And of course things go wrong in big organisations like councils, complex organisations. But you're right, we should be doing more to sell that. And actually from a previous scrutiny recommendation, let's not forget one of the things that we are taking forward is the Torvine Talks work, which we're hoping to get at least one copy of out this side of Christmas. So that's, again, another way that we can do more of that promoting.
Okay, we're going to the part 2 bit, which is discussion regarding the draft plan, identified objects. So are you okay if we go through 1 to 9? I think that's what we agreed. Does that seem reasonable? Anthony, you're going now. Oh, bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks for your contribution. I've got to get my... So this computer just not behaving itself this afternoon. Wellbeing objective number 1. I believe that's where we are with it. And that is we will raise educational attainment, helping young people and adults to gain the qualifications and skills needed to lead to positive lives. And there's a whole lot of stuff in here. Anyone wants to kick in with a question on that particular section? And we've got the ones that can answer the questions on this, or at least kick off the questions on this. Who wants to start on that one? Do I see any lights on or people putting their hands up? Go on, Steve.
Yeah. Reading in that, they're looking to bring on young people within the council. How are we approaching that? Whether it be shadowing or bringing on apprentices? How are we looking to bring that into our delivery?
And what I'm going to do here, if I may, Chair, this is exactly the reason, because I think what I'd like to see is chief officers responding to this. This is where you'll start to see, I hope, if my plan's going to in the way I want it to, is that you'll see more chief officers responding to that than just one. It naturally might fall to, it sounds like it's a Dermot question, but actually it may well not. You'll see more responses. So, or community indeed. So, so I'll leave this open to the chief officer if I can.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Yeah, I think this is probably a community's one more than mine, but yeah, there are a range of opportunities that we're looking to bring a number of apprenticeships on board, and a range of opportunities for young people to take part in a number of schemes within council. So I know in Flying Start we're considering one this week, so that work's already beginning. So I think there are a range of opportunities we're trying to build in across all of our departments to make sure that there are opportunities for looked after children, but also for other young people in terms of coming through. We realise that we've got the demographics of the council are such that it's really important that we look at that pipeline of young people coming through to try and take opportunities. So other colleagues may have some detail on some of the options that they're providing.
I think I think Dermot's touched upon obviously looked after children and how we develop apprenticeships for children leaving care. So our post-16, our post-18 cohort, our 25 cohort of children that have been in care. And again, I think as Dermot's pointed out, it's a cross-department approach, cross-directed approach. And whilst we started by saying this is something for communities, this is something for us all, because we all interact with those children, with those young people.
Just to add to that, if I can, one of the key challenges we've got elsewhere in the plans around some of our commitments to the Welsh language and Cymru 2050 and our commitment there. So we're also looking to work with schools around young people at YGG coming in and taking up placements with some of our early years providers too. And we're also looking to link up with Colleague Grant to try and bring some of those connections. So every opportunity we can, I think, to provide a wider range of opportunities, I think is going to help us hit quite a number of the different outcomes that we're looking to achieve. So any ideas that councillors have in terms of how we can further that work, obviously we're still thinking about how we can expand what we're already planning to do.
Is that okay?
I was looking more, you answered the question, very good. But what I was looking at, to give somebody a taste of what's actually happening, are we looking to do work experiences, particularly from the school environment?
In terms of the school environment, that's something that we're having discussions with secondary schools about. There's always some issues around child protection, GDPR and other things that we have to look at, but we are talking to schools about potentially developing other opportunities. That's at a very early stage. At the moment, we're focusing on particular aspects of the workforce where we know there's an appetite for young people, particularly around early years education and childcare, and we're looking at those first. They could become a model then, I think, perhaps, for us to look at other opportunities as we go forward. But some of that work's already underway.
I think, as Dermot said, then, so around those development opportunities, one of the things we heard last week in the Future to Vine event the officers were at was from the youth service, and the youth service talking about how they had developed children and young people who received services from the youth service to actually go on and become qualified youth workers and, you know, subsequently working in the youth service now. So I think there's lots of options, and we've got to keep every door open, really, haven't we?
Janet Jones?
Thanks, Chair. I've got a question. How are we going to encourage our children with autism into getting some employment? We know that they class looked after and in education till they're 25, but what are we offering them after 25 years of age? I know we have growing spaces in Cwmbran, but that's only one. There are a lot of people, more than probably all of us know, on the autistic spectrum, and it just worries me how are we going to get encourage employers to take these people on. I know they might be limited in what they can do, but we have to be seen to offering them some sort of education and stability and employability.
That's a big question. I'll try and answer it as best I can. Can I just clarify?
Sorry, Dermot.
No, that's okay, Councillor Jones. Just to be clear, the ALN, the Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act that's just come into effect, is seeing that transition from the old SEN legislation into that new piece of legislation. It doesn't actually mean that everyone who's got a diagnosis of autism is entitled to education to the age of 25. There's some very specific circumstances that would lead to someone continuing to have education up to 25. So there's a broad range of young people with autism. The vast majority of those are supported in their mainstream schools. We're looking again as part of our work around ALN to make sure that we're improving the quality of support that they get, and we're doing that work with schools. So new ALN strategies will be coming out very, very soon. It's in draft form at the moment. One of the things we do also need to do is to make sure that we're linking closely with post-16 providers. We're doing lots of work with Colleague Grant at the moment to make sure, again, that there are meaningful pathways for those learners going forward. And we're also talking to our external providers to make sure that the education that those young people out of county is also meaningful for them and isn't just about providing an education up to 18 or 19 and actually as a forward work plan. So I think there's a wider conversation there then with communities to look at engagement with the employers in Tormai and further afield. I can't speak for Dave, but I know that's something that's on his radar and that we're looking at in terms of looking at the widest range of possible connections. And that's part of the NEETS work that Dave also works on and we support with. So I can't give you much detail at the moment, but that might be something we come back and give you further detail on after this meeting. And it may be something we want to think about in terms of the plan. I wouldn't limit that, of course, Councillor Jones, just to young people with ALN and autism, but actually to that wide range of vulnerable youngsters who may have additional needs. Certainly something we can look at further.
Thank you there. Councillor Rose-Yvonne?
Thank you. First of all, I've got a question for Dermot that he can answer. Could you please allow our members that don't know what the Torfaen Youth Alliance is at the moment, because it's a relatively new name, but I did have that question asked. But my point about apprenticeships is really the point. It's not about not only looking at young people who want to come into local government, but we've got people who would perhaps like to go into the care system, like to go into the construction system, like to go into waste management or anything like that. And that's the important point. Our staffing is seriously low at the moment, and this is an opportunity where we can actually look at increasing our young people, growing our own is the word. I think we did it with social workers quite a few years ago with offering financial incentives to take their qualifications. But linking with our schools and one of the largest employers in Torfaen, not only going to local government and admin and what that covers, there's also a minefield of other finances and other things, you know, legal, if they're going down the legal route, is actually encouraging our young people to come on board into the council, have a taster session for whatever, and go from there. Thanks.
Do you want me to come in on that one? In terms of our emerging workforce strategy, which is currently being about, it is picking up on all those points that you've just actually outlined. We'll have major pushes in terms of apprenticeships and recruitment, exactly along the lines you're talking about, getting out into schools, getting out into other areas, attracting our own, setting them on the path, allowing them to develop. So when that comes forward, you'll see all those points covered off.
Sorry, Chair, I'll just come back on the Torfaen Youth Alliance, which was the question. So Torfaen Youth Alliance is a newly formed body made up of representatives from the various different children and youth groups representative groups across Torfaen. The name was chosen by the young people themselves. I think we, in our ignorance, thought the Torfaen Youth Parliament might be better, but the Torfaen Youth Alliance is an umbrella organisation. It's having its inaugural meeting in the next couple of weeks, I think. So hopefully that will act as a really useful touch point for lots of the discussions that we're picking up on today. And we're just doing some work with the Youth Alliance around its programme for the year. And when we have more detail of that, we'll obviously share that with members as we go forward. And I believe they're also part of our Torfaen participation strategy and a key contributor in part of that work too, so they'll figure in that work as well.
You live and learn, Rose. Thank Councillor Nick Corler.
Good afternoon, Chair. I just want to go on from what Councillor Janet Jones said about autism, which I take on board with what Dermot said, but there's no inclusion of any disability in the younger generation within this now. Can you give me some emphasis on the way that you're going to help the younger generation that have full disabilities in all walks of life, just not autism?
Yeah, and I think if we haven't made that strong enough in the plan already, then we'll emphasise that. As I mentioned earlier, we're bringing forward a new ALM, additional learning needs strategy that will be coming through. That will feed into the work that we've got in recommendation 1 and 2, particularly around the post-inspection action plan, where we have a recommendation about strengthening our strategic overview of ALM. So additional learning needs is an umbrella term for me in terms of all children with disabilities and learning needs. So you'll see more detail of that probably in the plans underneath. But if we need to strengthen that in terms of what's here, then certainly that's something we can look at as well. I don't know, Jason, in terms of children with disabilities or adults with disabilities, if there's anything else we can add there.
Yeah, I was just to reiterate what Dermot said, we probably need to make that more specific and more blatant within the plan in hindsight.
Thank you.
Okay with that, Nick? Cheers. Councillor Gillette Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Bullet point 3. By 2027, we aim to support 100% of families and individuals from becoming homeless through targeted intervention supports. I'm just wondering with the news today whether that is possible. I really hope it would be, but do you think it's a very ambitious target?
I think it has to be that ambitious a target, Councillor Thomas, and I think probably in spite of all the news as well, I think it's going to be a challenge that we recognise, but I think we can't say anything there that we want to achieve 100%.
Thank you there.
Good. Yeah, very good.
Is that in the selection? I think that was slightly further on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, you've got that one in there. Thank you. We're still on education at the moment. I've got Councillor Dave Williams, I think. Are you down there, Dave? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably more, this is less of a specific, I suppose, but more of a general. I think what was very good to see was the very specific targets and elements in this year, what we will do. You know, invest 17 million in this, etc. Obviously, some are not phrased in that way, and I can appreciate it's not possible to make everything targeted, potentially, but what I would suggest, it may be useful to sort of give some indication as to things that may come on stream when. We're looking to do this within the first 6 months, by October 20, whatever, or to actually make the statement, we will report on what those outcomes are. So I think it's trying to make what you're aiming to do more specific and open to scrutiny so that it's evident what has been done.
I think that's a good point. I suppose with strategic plans like this, it's about the level of specificity in the tracking measures that you want to achieve. So certainly the discussion we had with Aston recently about our post-inspection action plan, we had a similar discussion with them about, well, where's the detail so that you as members or members of the public can understand what's happening when, and to keep this at a manageable level for us in terms of the post-inspection action plan, and maybe for this that will exist in service and team plans. It's having that line of visibility, I think, for members. So I suppose there's a bit of a balancing act just about the level of detail that goes here, and that's something we can reflect on.
I did try to give you it out by saying that you could just say you're going to report on some of those things towards the end. So
I think the answer is there'll be a variety of mechanisms by which we have to report, and some of it will be very output focused. That's inevitable, and we would always try to take into account the overall arching impact. But certainly we will absolutely be doing all of that monitoring and reporting as frequently and as robustly as we possibly can.
Thank you very much.
I've got the final 3 on education, so I'm going to have to move us on a bit. But I've got Janet Jones, Norma Parish and Lucy Williams, and that's going to be a lot on this one. I've gone to objective 3.
It was only to say that it was remiss of me not, when I was talking about the children with autism, as endorsed by Councillor Haller, that we include people with disabilities as well, other than autism. So please accept my apologies, that remiss of me for adding that.
I'll make that as an observation. Norma Parish, Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know how inequality will be tackled, because it's very, very difficult to identify in some cases, and it's a very, very important issue.
Observations?
I mean, I think the answer is that the plan, the entirety of the plan, the 9 well-being objectives collectively are trying to underpin that very point around tackling inequality across our county. There are some very specific actions, of course, we can take to support some of our more vulnerable people, and there's quite an extensive list of the work that we're doing around supporting them with winter fuel payments or payments associated with cost of living crisis, etc. So there are some very targeted approaches that we can do around that. But I think what I would suggest is that the type of inequality that you're describing exists across all of our society, doesn't it? The whole idea behind this plan is that it really starts to tackle that and focus in perhaps at certain points on those that are most at risk. But actually, if we create a better place for our communities to live in, they're more likely to thrive. If we give them good education opportunities, they'll go on to achieve great things. If we create better employment conditions and employment opportunities for them, again, this is a way to help people who out of poverty and really drive that improving that inequalities agenda holistically. And actually, some of this is also just in terms of right the way through. I think every single wellbeing objective could be benchmarked in that way, right the way through to some of the longer term ambitions around our environment and etc. So I think it's a great question and something that we need to ensure that we convey properly throughout every element of the plan, every aspect of the plan, really.
Yes, I agree with that. It does go through all the aspects of life.
Thank you there, Norma. Are you okay with that? Thank you. So next question, Lucy Williams.
Sorry, no, I put my hand down. I was actually going to be asking questions about the next two objectives, so I'll wait till they've been spoken about.
Well, I'm trying to move us on a bit because the time's running out a bit. I'm trying to get full answers. There's been some very good questions here, and we're using our heads of service here well on this. Wellbeing objective 2. We will encourage and champion children, young people, and families so they can thrive. I can see where you're going with that. So next question on that. Did you want to go on that, Lucy? I can't hear you. Okay. Questions on this particular subject? There is silence here at the moment. Rose?
Yeah, I just think we should be answering the question about housing because there's a lot of our young people.
No, I appreciate that. We still have to go through these.
That's what I'm saying. We're invested in young people and families. If they haven't got a home, they can't be a family as such. They're living in somebody else's home or they're somewhere else. So I think investment in whatever way we can, whether or not it's investing in lobbying Welsh Government or what have you, but we need to have our young families in sustainable homes that they can actually move into, because I don't know how many we've got on the housing list at the moment, but there's a considerable number, and part of this work, encouraging to champion children, young people and their families to thrive. Before you can thrive, you've got to have a home. Thanks.
Sorry, Rose, well-made point. I didn't mean to get across you. That's an incredibly well-made point. To that one now, please. Lyndon?
I just picked this up as a start. I'm sure if other colleagues want to add in. We've got just over 3,000 on the housing register at the moment. Comes to Seabourne, and that's increasing by the day. We recognise that housing is a key issue, and we've got varying levels of demand, and particularly areas of supported housing for our more vulnerable people, both in temporary and in permanent, is in relatively short supply. So we're looking to do something around redeveloping one of the premises in Pontypool in terms of some of the supported housing, and the report going to Cabinet in October on that in terms of trying to get some wider provision on that. Some of the other key issues we've got a very hot property market out there at the moment, both in terms of property availability in purchasing a property, but also in rents that are above most people's affordability threshold, including affordability thresholds for some families that can't even afford a social rent. So we've got some combination of difficulties. And you are quite right. I come from a housing background anyway. I moved to the centre a few years ago, but I'm back in housing now. And we've always thought of housing as being as the bedrock to which all the other services fall off, really, because you can't deliver any of our other services unless people are in a warm, weatherproof, affordable home, really. So that's part of the challenge for us over the next few years now, is developing strategies, looking to work with our partners in getting more affordable housing onto available, which is hard, because you can't just build a house. You know, it takes time. It goes through planning. There's all sorts of other elements that we need to go through. Councillor Daniels, who's my executive member, is extremely passionate about this agenda item, and we're working to we're informing a session with our cabinet members shortly, and on the 27th of October we've actually got a housing summit in the diary with our partners to discuss some of the key issues. Part of that is around the availability of suitable housing across all tenures, but it does particularly impact those families who are vulnerable. Thank you, Chair.
Rose? Councillor Steve Evans?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The point I'm going to ask is about the antisocial behaviour to stop people going through the criminal courts. Just to make you aware that in my own particular area, the antisocial behaviour is escalating. So, looking at this as an overall plan, how are we going to deal with that if the increase is going to be dramatic?
Can I pick that one up, Chair? Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Evans. We've got, as you know, a well-established community safety team in Torvine that work very proactively with the police. We've also got a number of different interventions that we have in place. We've got multi-agency pupil intervention, which is our school programme where our teams are going in with other agencies to address children who are, and young people actually, who are on the cusp of antisocial behaviour, to stop them entering the criminal justice system. The last thing we need in any society is our young people entering the criminal justice system, because it's very difficult to get back out of the criminal justice system, and the general view is you'll come out of prison a better criminal rather than before you went in. So all of our activity is based upon prevention. The team is based around that. All their activity, working with partners, with schools, are around those activities as well with the police. So our central function in terms of our antisocial behaviour approach is dealing with those issues at source as they arise, using the team ethos that we've got.
You know, because I've got an interest in it. But the intervention prevention is, how can I say, particularly in my particular ward, there's not much for youth engagement to keep them away from that. How can we look into to make that happen, to make the antisocial behaviour less?
We also, Councillor, as well, just to add to the point of first question, obviously a really effective youth offending service. That has seen a massive shift in working from statutory involvement with children and young people to a greater focus on prevention and preventing children and young people coming through into the criminal justice system. There are positive links there with the youth offending service and the youth service. I guess what I would say is, if there are any particular, I know not wanting to list down into individual ward necessarily, but if there are any particular issues, then those services can activate resource into locality as well. So probably to keep that on the radar, and if there's anything you need assistance with, then we can step into that.
Can I come back again? I have been in contact with the youth service, but they're in a fixed place and they're not willing to come out and do outreach because of resources.
Yeah, I think they're great questions, aren't they? And any service challenges that you've just described, do come and speak to us, Councillor, and we'll address that, because seems a bit odd that we don't have some aspect of outreach in those areas. I'll gladly look at that. I think you're absolutely right to pick up on one point, though. I don't think it's reflected well enough in the plan yet. And probably, in some ways, how much we can afford to invest and how much we do invest in antisocial behaviour at the point it manifests itself is one thing. But how much of this plan is actively discouraging people from getting into that place in the first place is what I'd ask us to reflect upon. I think there is more that we can do. I think there is more that we will be doing over the coming years. And I think we've got to articulate that better in the plan. I think I was just looking through it then, I think there are gaps. Because the best way to avoid, or the best way to deal with antisocial behaviour, isn't it, is to avoid it in the first place. But it is back to that point that I was making. It's when we talk about pride in place and we talk about meaningful opportunities in life, we've got to create that environment so that people don't see antisocial behaviour as anything other than having a negative impact upon on their life and really impacting upon them going on to thrive and achieve all that their potential really would allow them to. So I think you're right. We've got to articulate it better, and we've got to focus in on areas of delivery, and then we'll be reporting back on that as well. So yeah, thanks for that.
Dave Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just looking at page 52, which is in relation to the objective, you say, do we need an action on play? I suggest you do. And I think the opportunity in the light of this previous discussion is that should be broadened to play and youth activity provision so that you have an opportunity to address some of the points that my colleague has raised.
I would also like to come in on this because I'm sat in a different world and it's not reflected here. But if you start talking about partnership working, come back to what David raised earlier about community councils and places like CCYP and working with residents groups, there's a whole lot of things that are being done, which are not really reflected in this at all. In terms of partnership working, heck of a lot of stuff being done out there with the voluntary sector as well. Maybe that needs to be included in this delivery plan. It's not there. CCYP, the various community councils have got initiatives all over the place. And maybe that's something that needs to be reflected in this as an ongoing piece of work. And play provision's the other one. It's all funded by them. Without it, you won't get anywhere. 60 grand a year off Cumbrae Community Council. And the other councils. It's not reflected in this at all. Can I have a comment on somebody on that little lot?
Yeah, I think what you're doing, Chair, is you're highlighting obvious gaps. It's not that the work isn't out there. It's not that we don't want to drive the work or improve it. It's that it's not reflected yet in the plan. I think yes, I mean, these are areas that we are continually developing, and I thank you for those contributions. You're right, they should be in there.
Yeah. Your objectives 2, are
Yeah,
you?
on 3.
On 3.
Are we moving to 3?
We're on 3 now, yeah.
Okay. So
just a minute, shall I just read out what 3 is so people are clear what it is? Wellbeing Objective 3, we will tackle inequality by focusing on easy identification and prevention activities that support people to live independent and fulfilling lives. And there's obviously quite a lot of narrative under that, which I'm sure you've all read. I'm just checking how much of that. Yeah. So, Nick, please.
So in my day job, I see people from all walks of life that have many issues about what's going on with the inflation and the extra money that they're getting in. I see people coming in daily with coins in their pockets to pay for their electricity bills for their meters. I saw somebody this week that had £4.50 to have in her pocket to put onto her electricity. She had 2 children and she had a husband, and they had £4.50 in their pockets in loose change to be able to buy some electricity. Whilst I read and I hear that lots of people now are getting help for this, sometimes I believe that those people that have that help are using their funds for other means apart from paying for their electricity. Can I ask, is there a provision of education to be able to help these guys out? Because right now, if somebody gives you £100 and you want to buy something outside the perimeter of electricity or funding something, and you want to buy a new Xbox or something, a lot of people will do that, and then they will put themselves into debt. Is there a plan for education for the money that's been given? Is there help with the guys? Is there help to educate the people why we're giving the money? And is there help to actually tell them that it's really important that they should be using it on those services apart from getting themselves deeper into debt? Because if somebody's been given £100 extra this month and they're not too phased on where they are, they're just going to get deeper into debt and they're going to put themselves into a worse situation. So is there any education going out within the remit of Torfaen County Council?
I think it's a very tricky area, isn't it? Let's be honest. We will work hard to ensure that people, our most vulnerable groups, get access to the benefits and the support schemes that are available. This council has performed exceptionally well in respect of has been recognised by Welsh Government as performing exceptionally well in ensuring that people we have access to those discretionary funds and we get them out quickly. I think what we will ensure that also happen is improved communications across the council can ensure that more people are aware of it. We'll have improved information, advice and access points across the council, giving consistent messaging around this. You can put all of that in place. And of course, naturally, we'll support very vulnerable groups, perhaps people who need it, to be educated as to how to sort of, with their life skills, because that's probably what we're talking about more here than anything else. There'll be schemes that we can support people with on that. But you do get into very tricky territory when councils are dictating to members of the public how they can spend the £100 in their pocket, even if perhaps as individuals we wouldn't necessarily agree that that's the wisest way that people might spend it. So we'll do our best to ensure that the messaging is the right one. We'll do our best to ensure that we support people that perhaps don't have the skills to manage as well as they can. And we'll make sure that we getting that information consistently out, and we'll get the funds out as quickly as possible. But I suspect most of what you're describing there will come from advice. It's going to be better received by friends and families and communities closest to those people than it is by a council coming along saying, don't buy that game, instead put some electricity in the meter, sort of thing. It's a very, very tricky one, isn't it, for us to deal with? But certainly, we'll do what we can in the way that I've described.
Councillor Lucy Williams.
Yes, it's a general question in relation to this objective 3. So the description of the objective is quite wide, isn't it? We will tackle inequality, etc., etc., etc. But there's only one specific point when you're looking at the actions, which is about preventing 100% of families and individuals from becoming homeless. So I guess this is kind of, and I fully understand that this is a work in progress, this document, but I wonder if that third objective could be fleshed out a little bit, perhaps by putting other types of inequality. So like my colleague mentioned before, you're saying inequalities, so maybe they could be something under the actions about, we will ensure that families who are struggling under the current cost of living crisis, to live as sustainably as possible. I think it just needs to be fleshed out a bit, and maybe officers could say we will tackle inequality, which is an awfully big phrase, what specific types of inequality under this objective 3 are we looking at? Hope that makes sense, that question.
It makes perfect sense. If I can just read out some of the work that we've been doing in terms of more up to date plan. So yes, it still talks about preventing families and individuals from becoming homeless. We talk also about working with partners to reduce homelessness through greater access to suitable accommodation and support services. We talk about enhanced support across communities to meet residents' needs, with less requiring formal services, community-based reablement services that will help more people to retain greater levels of independence at home, the use of assistive technology help more people to remain independent, and we're talking also further about things like helped some of the serious impacts of the cost of living crisis and COVID actually with a range of financial support for those most in need. So we are already evolving that conversation, those areas. But again, anything that you can contribute to enhance that further would be absolutely welcome. But yeah, you're right. It's a glaring gap in the plan that we were able to share with you.
Thank you.
I'm reminded time is ticking on. We need to ask members to focus on content objectives if they feel that anything is missing, rather than asking questions scrutinising specific areas. So I'm going to have to move this along a little bit. The next one is Councillor Carl Gordon. Are you there, Carl? No, you were there even.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah. Probably not something that's missing as such, but something that probably one of the sort of us to look at going forward is the piece around sort of domiciliary care. Obviously, with ageing population, we're all living a bit longer, thank goodness, and it's something that I sort of deal with in another sphere to an extent. I'm pleased with the work that's gone on in this regard, particularly around paying the sort of the living wage. I mean, I guess the living wage is a blessing and a curse in some senses, because more and more careers, professions all pay £9.90 as it is now, and the sort of the stress and the sort of obligations of a domiciliary care worker when juxtaposed with similar sort of low wage occupations, people are moving out of care, to be honest, because it's not seen as an attractive career as such. I just wonder, as a commissioning authority, commission the private sector to provide domiciliary care to our residents. Can we look to bring more of that in-house? Because obviously when you sort of third party, when you outsource domiciliary care to the private sector, they've got to make a profit too. That's why they're in business. And I wonder whether we could look to some of the work that's gone on in a neighbouring authority in Monmouthshire, because there's a template there to bring more of the care in-house, and we're able to sort of police it slightly better as well, I think, if it's in-house. Thank you, Chair.
What I'd say very broadly to that, Councillor, is yes, that's not off the table. I think there is a crisis with domiciliary care at the moment, and as you mentioned, a lot of our domiciliary care is from the private market. So it certainly is something as part of our I guess review of adult social care that we're looking at as well. So it's certainly something that's not off the table.
So can I just come in there quickly as well, Councillor Gordon, just to assure you that is an item that's actually gone to healthier communities as well, before Christmas. So that'll be considered by members at that opportunity as well.
Well, thank you. Anyway, next item, Councillor Sue Mason. Oh, Sue? You there?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go back to the next question regarding the cost of living now at the moment, and where he's having customers coming in and they're struggling. On appraisal point with TCBC, our financial inclusion team are working very hard with those out in the community They help them through their finances. They support them with gas and electric. Also does my other role. Only fear that I've got, that demand that's going to come in now as winter hits us, will be the crisis of choice, heating or eating. But there again, with TCPC departments that's there, they are working with these people. And my main concern is influx that they're going to have. Thank you.
Janet Jones.
Thank you. Going to the well-being and the cost of living, especially with the energy crisis we have, has any thought been given into supporting volunteer groups who are considering open warm banks, which will allow people on their own, if they can't afford, obviously, to heat their homes for great times, to go and have a hot coffee, a hot drink or a snack or something? Is any consideration being given to support for these groups? And is it something that could be considered within this plan, please?
The answer is yes. We are considering that. Dave Leach is considering that, along with Bronavon, I believe, at the moment, as in terms of some solutions. But again, I'd be certainly encouraging members of Scrutiny and wider, and all communities actually, to be engaging with David and the team in order to sort of like highlight what their concerns are, their areas of focus, their priorities. That's the purpose of that directorate and that conversation, so that this council can be as responsive to the challenges that you've just highlighted there, Councillor Jones, and actually referencing the point that Councillor Malson made before, exactly the same area. We'd agree that they are unknown factors and real risk factors for us for the future, Councillor Malson, but but you keeping us aware of it, keeping us sharp on it, bringing them to our attention, we can work together with communities to see the best way to solve it. What we have to be realistic about is the council has set its budget for the year, it's set out its priorities and how that money will be spent. We're not sitting on pots and pots of money. What we're doing is distributing the money that we've got in those pots as quickly as we possibly can to our most vulnerable groups, and we'll continue to advocate on their behalf. We'll continue to seek further funding to support them, and Welsh Government are doing a job on that themselves. To be fair, they're working hard on that front too. We'll continue to work closely with them to ensure that we do all that we can. But I think a lot of this is about solutions that can be found in communities, and we'd encourage those kind of conversations to happen.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, Steve. Rose Sibbon?
Yeah, I've just got a point on the targeted support for young carers in here. I commend the scheme for ID cards, but I've been there with school lunches with children on free school meals, having cards and having to queue, and identifying actually, that I am a young carer or I am having free school meals or what have you. And I just wondered whether we'd thought about having a young carer citizen card that could perhaps be colour-coded if you're a carer or if you're a child with disability, or, so just a different coloured dot on the card or what have you. Try not to identify them, but so that we know that they're covered with the support. I mean, my issue within a school environment was that, all the children on free school meals had to queue up with a ticket in their hand, and all the others who had their money to pay got money. So we changed the system, and now everybody's got a card or a thumbprint or what have you. My concern is that how do we capture all these young carers? Because not everybody wants to be identified as a young carer, but yet they will need that support or that extra little bit of caring for them rather than who they're caring for. And just an ID card for a young carer sometimes could be not accepted as well as perhaps it could, you know, perhaps all young carers or all young people's card could be. We talked about the Green Meadow Community Farm this morning and allowing the community to access. You know, I think there's nothing better than those people that pay their council tax to Torvine having a little bit back and saying, you get a reduction or you get this, you know, because you live in our borough and we value we value you as a resident. So my point about the young carers ID, sometimes it can work in an adverse way as well as being what is intended to be a good thing.
A very brief answer, Councillor Stevon. You'll obviously be aware that the Young Carers ID card was piloted by Torvine as an initiative through Welsh Government. That's certainly, those comments are certainly something I take on board. I'll take on board. I chair the Regional Strategic Carers Board, so certainly something I can take there. And you know, anything that comes from that, we can incorporate in our plan going forward.
Thank you there. David Williams, you're last on this. I'll move it on.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a very general point, which is that you're obviously seeing a more up-to-date version, but one would expect in something like this that all 4 columns are populated. Otherwise, you've got orphan statements, and that's not very helpful. Simple point.
Yeah, I will make sure that we share the most up-to-date plan with you immediately after the meeting, and again, we'll keep the conversation going, really, in terms of how we continue to develop that.
Thanks, Stephen. Unless anybody's got any burning issues on this, I'll get on. It's actually well covered on there by the look of it. What do you want? Thank you.
Chair, perhaps you noticed me if I got a big...
Sorry, I can see you up there.
Yeah, just going back to Janet Jones's response about people finding warm places.
Yeah.
Our centre runs down on a Friday, and I think the council, if they collaborate a bit more with the community centres, I think that's a good way forward. And I think that reflects on the work that goes on besides that. You know, I mean, for people who are lonely, people who can't heat their homes, we provide them hot food and everything. So the initiative's there. It's just that the council just needs to collaborate and bring it all together with resilience. That's all.
Yeah,
totally. Thank you. We'll move on to that. I'm sure there was a response on that. Thanks, Steve. So wellbeing objective 4, we will address our climate and nature emergencies, recycle more and make improvements to the local environment. Who wants to go at that one? Dave Williams just walked out because he would have done. I'm pretty certain on that. There are points on that anybody wants to make? Dear me. That's one David Williams was. Pardon? Lucy Williams. Lucy? You're on mute, Lucy.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Dave's just gone out. He'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, no. Unless I've misheard you, I think you've missed out one of... You've read Objective 4 as being Objective 5.
Oh,
Objective
sorry, you
4
are right. Sorry, Lucy.
The sustainable...
No, sorry, I got my glasses mixed up again. Sorry.
Right.
Objective 4, sorry, you are right. Wellbeing Objective 4, we will make Torvine more sustainable by connecting people and communities socially, digitally and physically. You are very much on the ball. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I was just moving us on too much there. Sorry about this. My apologies.
That's okay. So, sorry, while I'm still unmuted, can I just ask a quick question about that?
Yeah, go on.
Again, I'm very aware that probably we haven't got the most up-to-date version, but under that Objective 4, which again it's a very wide, generalised statement, we'll make more people to travel by public transport, etc. I would suggest it might be important to specifically put under that action addressing the needs of people with limited mobility, especially wheelchair users, to make sure that they're not excluded from access to transport, particularly whether that area could rightly sit under Objective 4.
I am. Councillor Evans?
The point I wanted to raise is with the electric vehicle charging stations, have we got enough for the borough? Are they strategically in the right place? And how many are we hoping to bring more regarding more people buying electric vehicles? That's a development plan for the council that needs to be looked at.
Councillor Ashley, do you want me to take both of those?
Yeah,
so if I go back to Councillor Williams's point about particularly the public transport, I think we recognise our role is one of facilitation and enabling and not a core funder for public transport, and it's one which particularly we work with our partners at the regional level, and major changes proposed by Welsh Government for bus, so it's one where we're looking to promote and work with. It's not solely within our gift of control, but obviously within any support for that. As you'll see, the work we've done at Pontypool recently with the bus stops is then increasing accessibility for people with disabilities, and we use that through applications into Welsh Government capital grant particularly, and we use that as like a phased programme for supporting access for the bus services with the raised curbs to allow access, and then obviously work with the operators to make sure they've got the suitable buses particularly for that. And then you've seen the new train station at Pontypool New Inn is also going to have a disabled lift to ensure access at Pontypool Station. And you'll see that we're also, within the plan, looking at taking forward the future for Cwmbran Station as well in terms of improving accessibility, and the business case, obviously, that is subject to Welsh Government funding and Transport for Wales buy into that. And on Councillor Evans's point on EV across the borough, I think the answer to the question at the moment is no, no and no. But the full intent is we will. Okay, we're currently out for advert actually for our zero emissions officer, who is going to be then putting in place the strategy for EV and the plan across the borough. It is not without its challenges, particularly on our terrace streets. You can't just have cables across the floor, and we haven't got space for some of the connections as well. So this is where the role of the market, UK government, etc., in terms of what is future for the charging industry, needs to come into that. We've got more charging points coming in this year. I think the numbers in the plan through City Deal, again, a regional strategy of just rolling that out. But as you heard this morning, we've also got constraints on grid at the moment, which we heard in council, so we can only go so far. So if I give an example, I can't convert to an electric fleet yet in the depot because the power connection isn't strong enough to convert. We've had grant, which is now going forward for us to, we're going to have to bring in a substation at the depot to enable us to have more power to be able to convert to EV in the future. So it's in the plan, it's definitely part of our climate change work, and you'll see a lot in the next year coming forward as we get these plans absolutely in place to then being, particularly there's lots of funding at UK government level in particular to allow us then to take some of this forward.
So don't charge you, charge it.
Maybe.
Gosh. Any more? Rose?
I just wondered on this point of connectivity and the excellent work we did within the schools with COVID and getting the children connected. Are we linked with the education system for another COVID, or even the attendance records within each school? If they're unable to attend, they could possibly do their lessons online, and I just wondered whether or not our schools are equipped well enough to cope with extended wireless connection from school to home and what have you. So.
Obviously, we invested quite a lot in resources for schools over the last couple of years, and there's a lot of kit available. In terms of digital exclusion for families at home, that turned out to be less of an issue than we initially anticipated, and certainly the use of Wi-Fi dongles, that's probably the wrong term, Wi-Fi, I knew I got it wrong. Wi-Fi dongles was half what we thought it was going to be. I think there's still an issue about that. We are anticipating there could be some impact in terms of another COVID behind this this winter, and it's a subject we're talking to schools about. We've appointed a new post, assistant head of learning, who's specifically looking at our ICT strategy for education going forward. That will build on some of the work we've done with EdTech. So while that's not immediately flagged in this plan, it's part of our work programme within education, and certainly something that we're... Yeah, so it's connected, but again, it may be something that we might want to flag, because again, we'll be bringing forward a particular strategy around that, one for us to see if we need to root it in this plan as well.
I have a question about active travel. I see the narrative of active travel, but I don't see any sort of further narrative. I mean, I've had discussions over the years with you about that. You see Cardiff and other places and Newport getting much more active than we are at the moment. We've done some good work on it, but it doesn't seem to be any future work on it. I mean, I'd like to see some in-town stuff done, particularly in Cwmbran, where we develop our networks for cycling and walking. We've got the canal, and we've got some work going on there. It would be useful to see some development, more development, linking up what we've got and widening some of it. Is there any possibility of that at all?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ashley. I think this year, for this year's activities, we've identified the schemes that we've got the funding through. I've just gone up to the by 2027, and I think we can beef that up in terms of we've got the approved active travel network map agreed by Cabinet earlier this year, and we're actually turning that into a delivery plan for that long-term programme. And members will recall you had the members' seminar on the active travel network maps, which is a big aspiration to get that connectivity which you're talking about. So what I'll do at the beginning of the plan, not in the 1420 for this year we will, but the by 2027, increase that to link to that wider connectivity.
Will that include, I mean, I'm being a bit wicked now, will that include e-bikes and all that, because they are so popular now, it's ridiculous.
Well, the infrastructure, obviously, isn't it? That's for e-bikes, is for people to use, isn't it? E-bikes is within the Council's action plan for climate change is already in there. It is, yeah.
Anybody, any more on this one? I'll move on to the next section, which I was a bit premature. Chief Exec.
Yeah, I wonder if, just taking account of the fact that you don't have the latest version, and again, apologies, just the way our systems work, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not anything we've held back. I wonder if actually Neil's got the latest version of this. Ooh. As we go into each of the conversations around the next areas, would it be helpful for Neil to read out the latest iteration of the well-being of the by 2027 well-being objectives for you to frame your conversation in, or would that not be helpful?
That'd be very helpful.
Is that okay?
I'm making the chair's decision here.
Okay. Then I'll ask if we could ask Neil to do that, because he's got the latest version, Chair.
Being objective.
Yes, so for wellbeing objective 5, under the heading by 2027, it says we will have increased the area of council-owned land managed for biodiversity. We will be well on our way to meeting our target to be net zero carbon by 2030. We will have exceeded our recycling targets with a greater range of materials collected for recycling. We will be zero tolerant to environmental crimes with less litter, fly tipping and dog fouling. There will be greater pride in place and greater support for community environmental action. Council buildings will use less fossil fuels, and suitable buildings will be used to generate renewable electricity. Our vehicles will be ultra-low emission, either electric or hydrogen. We will have increased the number of EV charging points. We will have increased energy generated from renewable energy schemes. We will have decreased the amount of waste not being recycled. We will have increased the borough's tree coverage and established new orchards. and we will have trained over 1,000 climate champions.
David Williams, as mentioned.
All I'd say, Chair, is I'm conscious we don't have a great deal of time left. It's obviously going to be quite helpful to see the latest iteration. I guess I would ask, what is the route and avenue for us to feed in comment, observation, suggested wording, which the Chief Executive has indicated he's open to, so we know how to take this forward?
We would accept your observation there, David. Chief Executive, can you answer?
I'll answer that, Chair. I would say all comments, everything you've been working through admissions, as Stephen has already explained, they may have already started to feature. The plan is iterative. Every day we make additions to it as we consider things we need to build in, we need to add in. So it's very much ongoing, this piece of work. Please email me if it's easier to be the single point of contact. Anything you wish to see that's not included, that you think we may have overlooked, that you want added or you'd like further information on, I'll act as a conduit to ask chief officers for commentary or explanation or detail that we can add into the plan as we continue building this over the next couple of weeks. We're about a fortnight. There's about another 2 weeks, I would say, of probably me spending lots of time each day adding bits to this plan, making sure this plan is as thorough as we want it to be before we publish. I think probably is a good point for me to mention something about the original design principles for the plan as well. Stephen did mention this during his opening narrative. This plan isn't necessarily going to contain everything that is contained within service plans and team plans. There is a huge amount of reviews. I've heard Dermot mention a review. There's a huge amount of reviews taking place this year across all service areas that won't necessarily be brought up to the surface and published in this plan. Partly because this plan would be absolutely ginormous and it would be inaccessible, and we also felt as a design principle when we set out in starting to create the plan that we would try to pull forward the things that have outcomes this year or outcomes over several years that actually will be of interest to people. So restructuring services, although it's vitally important that we have robust and fit-for-purpose service areas and personnel, actually, probably if we did the test on the member of the public, they don't really want to know whether we've got those structures in place. They want to know what the ultimate outputs of having those structures are in place. Now, for this year, in the delivery element of the plan, some of those reviews may not generate this year an output, but next year, the result of that review may have something that has an addition under the "this year we will" column. So the idea, and I think Stephen mentioned this, is that every year these columns slide across from right to left, and the "what we wills" this year then appear next year in the "so far we haves," if that makes any sense, and I hope that makes sense to everyone listening at home as well.
Could I ask you if you've got data, targets and outcomes? Because that makes a lot of sense of scrutiny. We understand that. That's the one we criticise, and that's the one we understand. Without that on there, we don't understand it.
Okay, I think as a design principle, we didn't want to overlay in this document with masses of statistics and masses of targets. However, they are all contained, I believe, in service plans. So this would be, the content of this plan has been pulled up through from the service planning process, and that's how this plan will happen every year. It will be pulled through from that massive content that exists in that layer beneath in service plan.
I understand that. You can put those in as appendices. You don't have to sit on the out. But, I mean, a lot of us are familiar with what Lyndon has to put up with PSP, because his sort of sit-in documents with hyperlinks is massive. It makes sense of it, because now you've gone on to the regional one, it's even worse. He can comment on this. We're well aware of what your problem is, where you have to hyperlink into everything, but the actual document itself can be quite focused. I know the chairs have, because we sit there and scrutinise stuff like that, but making it look a working document, I understand the problem. I think members have got a feel for that a lot of the time. It's a working document is what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. And
yeah.
All service plans are published.
Yeah.
So we would link into service plans so that people who wanted to get really into the granular detail will be able to easily access it, but just by clicking a link in most instances, if they are reading it in an electronic form.
We have some members who are extremely good at them. I'm looking at one or two of them. Yeah, and they're very well versed at that. And others would like more or less executive summary, which they can follow and get a feel for. Yeah? Pardon? You need to come in. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, members. Just following on from Neil's update there, and I'm conscious that it's now 4 o'clock and you've still got 4 objectives to go through. So if it's okay with members, we propose that you move through each of those pretty swiftly and just concentrate now on whether you feel there are any issues that are missing from under each of those objective headings, just in order to progress more expediently.
I would like to thank Neil for that, because that was really helpful, Neil. Thank you.
Confirm, members, did you have any issues that you feel are missing from Objective 5?
I'll read out Objective 6. So Objective 6, by 2027, it reads, we will have supported businesses in the county to deliver strong economic growth and help residents into skilled, prosperous and secure employment. We will have encouraged growth in SMEs, micro-enterprises and business startups. We will attract digital entrepreneurs, and the Springboard Innovation Centre will be a hub for innovative business. We will have developed brownfield sites for employment with new and existing businesses. We will have established new parcels of land for industrial use. We will have driven up spend in our local economy. We will have skilled the local workforce to attract and retain employers. We will use some council assets differently to encourage business startups and growth in the creative sector, and we will have grown our foundation economy. 7. Under 7, by 2027, all schools...
Neil, the chair just had to step away, so just pause for a second.
Minutes of activity every day. We will increase opportunities and have more people taking part in sports and physical activity. We will expand mental health support for people of all ages. We will expand inclusive play facilities suitable for all children. We will work with communities to develop a range of provision so that more residents can access support and take part in volunteering activities. Torvine Leisure Trust will provide greater access to facilities for school pupils. We will develop community support services and reduce the number of adults and children needing formal care, and more young people will be taking part in outdoor pursuits. Okay, Wellbeing Objective 8.
Shall we take questions after you've gone through all the objectives?
Yes. Wellbeing Objective 8. We will increase visitor numbers to destinations in Torvine, including a revitalised Green Meadow Community Farm. We will rejuvenate our town centres and encourage a nighttime economy with more visitors enjoying good quality places to eat and drink. The British will have a new surface watercourse and a vision to realise its future potential. We will have reduced the level of antisocial behaviour and serious violence within our communities. And by 2027, we'll have investment from COVID recovery, levelling up shared prosperity funds, which will help increase visitors. Okay, and Objective 9, we will be digitally enabled and efficient council, providing excellent customer service, and more residents will be completing online transactions. We will be proactively signposting to a wider range of services. More residents will be accessing public information, advice and guidance, anytime, anyplace, anywhere.
Thanks, Neil. Do we have any questions from members on any of the other? Yes, Steve?
as I said previously, about digital for the older generation. They don't like digital. It doesn't matter which way you do it or how you try and focus on them. We've got to make sure that we keep a route open for them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly our approach, whilst it is digital first, it's not digital only. That's absolutely true. And that does reflect that very point. Some people can't, some people won't, and any combination of those, really. So you're absolutely right. What we're really trying to do, though, is where people can get access to information, advice, signposting or services digitally, 24/7, because let's not forget, if they're waiting for the council to open, it's only certain operating hours, and then, you could end up sitting in queues on phones waiting to get the answers that you need. The more of that we can do digitally across a 24/7 basis, including the weekends and days that the council are not open and hours that we're not open, the better. That will free us time up then to deliver our services really effectively and efficiently for those that do need that additional level of support. Totally agree that may well include some of our older cohort, although I would say they are certainly the 50 pluses are the fastest growing cohort in some aspects of digital connectivity, and I wouldn't underestimate them. I think certainly I'm never cease to be impressed by some of the people I know that can do a lot more with digital than I can. So
come back on that. There's still a lot of dinosaurs about. The other part I was going to say, I need to.
And those areas that are missing in terms of that we're working on, we're missing out on this, that really impact on communities. Let's make sure we include them. So yeah, thanks for that.
Before the Chair gets his breath back, that brings me to the point of what I think may be missing out of the whole document is our partners. You've mentioned a few along the line, Torfaen Leisure Trust, but there's no big mention of health, and they have a big impact on our well-being within the police, with our antisocial behaviour, etc. So, how are we going to bring those partners on board to work towards our county plan?
Yeah, that's some of the how we'll do it rather than the what we'll do. Although much of what we'll do will be together. You're absolutely right. I think we probably do need to be clearer in respect of this being a partnership, not just with communities, although they're an important part of it, but also, of course, with our statutory and community partners more broadly. So, yeah, I think we can strengthen that, certainly in the introduction to the plan, because I think it talks about the how we're going to do it.
But also in the commentary, it says we will, or we will with our partners do, that type of commentary, so that they know we're not just doing it all on our own. We're actually looking for others to contribute.
Yeah, we can. I mean, part of the problem, Councillor Seaborn, is that everything is about doing with somebody else, and I think that's the message we have to convey. We'd write that in every line. We're doing none of this by ourselves, and we'd be naive to think that we could. So I think it's about us conveying that better, to say throughout every line of our delivery will be about our approach to partnership working and doing things better together. I think we've got to convey that. Completely right. It really is, yeah. So it's a plan, and sort of the subheading of a plan for all people. It's a plan for all partners as much as it is a plan for all people, yeah.
Any more questions? No, thank you. No, you've just taken over a little bit there, don't mind. Right, any more questions? Would you like to make summary comments before you we sum up? Summary comments, yes. Around the table here. Observations?
I think I'd just like to thank, it's been a very constructive session from my point of view. It's really great to hear your views. I think what would be helpful, Chair, if we could agree somehow, not quite sure how this would work, but somehow that we keep that dialogue open between scrutiny members and Neil, as we've said. There'll be opportunities, of course, going forward for further engagement with the wider community and member representatives. But I think somehow whilst there may be some prescriptive recommendations that require responding to, that idea that this group of interested people can continue to feed in and receive updates of the plan, that will be very helpful. The one thing I would just please ask people to note is that this is a process of working out loud, which means there will be errors, there will be things in the plan that don't make the final cut. The officers of Neil has tried to, and officers have tried to put everything in and try to craft something for us to review. But it's certainly, none of this is set in stone, and you may well see some stuff coming on and some stuff going off as further iteration of the plan occurs. So I just ask people to note that too.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
And then, though, Chair, if I could say that we need to be putting out, as I said previously, the positive things we are doing, because people are not always aware of what we're actually doing and what we're doing really well. I think that's the thing we need to lead on, of anything.
Thank you, Steve. I was about to say, I had an inkling of what you were suggesting in this because we did the previous scrutiny and got an idea you were asking us to comment on this. This is obviously the work in progress, and I think it always is going to be a work in progress. And that's the important thing. Neil recognises that, and so does other people around the table, because it is a process. I believe that's right, and with outcomes, hopefully. And my little homily earlier about that. So thank you very much indeed, everybody, for asking questions, and you're not going out there. And thank you guys there. You obviously finished your little bit here, and thank you very much for your contributions. And, you know, that's been pretty helpful. We now can set our recommendations for what they are. I think they're probably fairly obvious. And then you can go now. And we will agree our recommendations. Thank you guys for sitting there. And Rachel. Look forward to seeing you again on this. Thank you, Steve. Brilliant. So now back to Rebecca. Members, yes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Lyndon, as always. Okay. You go right, Stephen. Well done. So you guys will... Tom, are you ready, Mr. Evans, sir? Yeah, open to Tom to make some comments on this. Everybody online there.
I'm not going to go for the individual recommendations like I normally do, because Rebecca's here to do that. It's just to say, obviously the offer was made for continuous dialogue, which is great, but let's not forget that scrutiny and this scrutiny process today is it's a statutory process that we're going through, and you know, we're here to listen and discuss the draft county plan and to make recommendations. Now, it may be that some of those recommendations have already been addressed in the week since this report was dispatched, but you know, you're not to know that. Nobody was to know that, but to make the recommendations you feel that need to be made, if they've been addressed, great, but
make those that need to be made. When you see the next iteration of that of the county plan, then you're free to pass on further comments. But I just want to get across that yes, this is our
Thank you.
I suppose our one opportunity as a collective scrutiny committee to look at the draft county plan and to make recommendations which the executive then has to respond to.
Thank you, Tom, for saying that. Yes, it is. We make recommendations, and if it's an ongoing process, then that's reflective of what we've got at the moment. Right now, Steve?
Yeah, one recommendation I'd like to put in is the initial start point, the midway point, and hopefully the end point to make a lot of these achievable. It's all right putting things in place, but you've got to have some checks halfway to make sure that the recommendations are being followed up if there's a problem.
I think I know what you mean by that. What you mean is it's now. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, to be honest. Right. What Rebecca's going to reflect.
No, not at all. It's members' recommendations.
It is members' recommendations. So is anybody... Councillor Clarkson, hello. Okay, what do you want to say, Linda?
Yeah, I've been quiet up until now. I'm just mindful of the fact that we've got a lot of community buildings that we rely on for all of these strands. We've talked about using them as warm hubs and that type of thing. They're all struggling with cost of living as well. And could we look at identifying where those difficulties are, if we can offer advice and support to make sure that they're resilient and future-proofed as well?
Any more online or out there of solid recommendations? Councillor Williams, sorry, Dave.
Picking up, I think my colleague, Councillor Clarkson's made an excellent, very valid point. And I think one of the things that should be a part of a county plan is how we ensure that our communities, but also those things that support our communities themselves, remain sustainable. Community halls is one example, but there will be other hubs in the community, other very important community organisations that we'll know of who have a part to play in this. And I think ensuring that they're sustainable and able to support us as active partners is an important part of what we include in our plan.
Any more?
If I could just briefly come back in on that, it could be offering support with becoming more carbon neutral themselves, which would feed into our plan, bring down their energy costs. They could sort of look at funding that from their own sort of sources. We could help them with that sort of information. But all these sort of things link in with making them more sustainable and resilient.
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Just to sort of bring that back in more in line with the actual remit of the scrutiny activity for this report, because obviously they're not looking at service delivery specifics at this point. So, but whether there's more reference within that, those objectives about sustainable community assets and how we work with them. Is that okay? Thank you.
Nicely put.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Can I add to that? And I perhaps need to declare that I'm a trustee of CoStar, but our grant funding as well should be looked at. That, you know, if we're giving out grants in different areas, if they are fulfilling the remit to stick to our objectives, our county plan, then, you know, they should be looked on with preference, really, so that if you've got some group that's not even sticking to a county plan and are going totally off by creating more energy and waste and everything else, and we're giving them funds to do it, do you understand what I'm saying? So we actually fund a lot of organisations, particularly within our community halls and our buildings, etc., the groups that are in there. And if they actually work towards our objectives of the county plan, then perhaps we should be looking at that in a favourable light. So, I don't know whether that's quite our remit, but you know, when we dish out our grants to organisations, you know, we need to have the community on board and following our county plan as well. So,
can I say what you're hitting on is the conversation that we had in the past with cross-cutting resources, where we're saying if we've got partnership working, who funds it?
That's it. Yeah.
That's a very old argument because there were 72 partnerships.
But not only that. I mean, if I can be, and I don't like being parochial online or whatever, but if I can be a bit parochial, the Costa Group, their interests are everything that the council's got. Their recycling, their regeneration, their community work, etc., etc. So that, what I'm saying is the plan that we're putting out there now is to link all the communities in doing different aspects of whether or not it's biodiversity or whether or not it's caring young people or what have you. But if there's groups out there that are actually working along the same aims as us, then we should look on that favourably.
I think what you're pointing to, it says it in that plan. If you're meeting cross-cutting objectives in line with the council, then it should be about the partnership thing, which is what PSP was about. Remember what we looked at there? Can you make that up?
There's a few hands up now, Chair, I think.
Who's Steve? Seen you. Sorry, Janet Jones, I'm not looking in that direction. And Gillette there as well.
It's okay. Under Objective 6, working with local employers, should we also include working with the voluntary sectors who can act as mentors for people who want to go into vocational work, such as librarians, curators, etc.?
Good point. Councillor Colette Thomas. Colette? I hear you.
So I agree with the point that Rose made, and I think what we really mean is that the service level agreements we have with the community groups need to correspond with our county plan. I think that's the other point I'd like to raise is about consultation, and I'd like to be assured that we will consult with our older residents and our younger residents and be fully inclusive. Thanks, Chair.
David, was it? Steve, sorry, it was Steve next, sorry.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to ask on the recommendations, are we able to achieve this with now the financial impact we're receiving? Perhaps from Welsh Government, the funding be smaller going forward, or will there be even less restrictions on grant funding and everything else to collaborate with these groups?
I think perhaps that's more of a question than a recommendation, but I can note that down in the comments section.
Yeah, but it's a very important one to make this structure work.
Yeah, I think in relation to that, I think there's a bit about making the point that sometimes the priorities are not clear, if there are some that are a higher priority than others, or if there are some dependencies in terms of such and such a priority is dependent on the successful access of funding and things like that. So I think I think in any plan that we have like this, it should be quite useful to outline what comes first.
Sense in also, because I raised the point earlier about community council paying for our play schemes, although the play schemes seem to be owned by the borough, not by the community councils. Rose got the same point about Costa. Those are partnership arrangements, also voluntary sector arrangements, and do get people's noses a bit at times. It needs to be clear that they are partnership arrangements and the community arrangements. That thing needs to be clear, I think. Am I right there, Rose? Yeah, and that's part of the recommendation about who does what and why. And certainly, one of the recommendations, if we're going to have proper community work in, it needs to be clear that it's a partnership, not a lead authority, etc. Because one of the recommendations I do like is the fact we've now got a community set up where we can do things. Yeah. Come in now. It is. Go on. No. I thank you for that. I thought it was quite exciting. That's the word I would use for it. It was a lot in there, and navigate. A work in progress is the word. It reminded me a lot of the PSP, that in a sense, there's a lot in there, but it does need sort of navigating in it. Would you like to say what you're going to say now?
Sorry, you picked up the point about, selling ourselves right at the beginning, and that reputation.
Yeah. Councillor Horler?
Chair, I have to leave shortly because I've got a ticket on my car if I don't. So my question is, do you think that the scrutiny committee can ask if there's more engagement with community councils regarding this plan moving forward? Is there going to be a lot more? Because let's face it, they're obviously involved in one way or the other. So is there going to be any more engagement with community councils? Not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but there doesn't seem to be, there isn't an engagement there that could place.
Could I say something that they're actually putting quite a lot of officers in the role of working with, so I suspect the answer is yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. And do you mind if I can?
Thank you, Chair. So just to try and focus that a bit more. So in terms of the process now going forward, Tom covered that off, and also we'll pick up the points that Councillor Thomas and Councillor Hall had just made in regards to consultations further down the line in those delivery plans, more specifically with younger people, older people, relevant community groups. Then in terms of specifics on information that's contained under the objectives, I started noting them under each objective, but I know some of them will cross over into different objectives. There was the point that Councillor Horler raised about greater reference and strengthening on information around people with disabilities and all the relative objectives. There was the point about antisocial behaviour, and the Chief Executive raised the point that there was a need to articulate throughout the plan how we avoid people entering into activities around antisocial behaviour, so reference more to that. Councillor Williams, there was a point that you made, I don't know if you want to put this as a recommendation, under Objective 2 as well, about expanding play provision to play and youth provision. Again, that was going back to that point.
Youth activity.
Youth activity, okay, thank you.
So it was actually so that we were trying to address some of the antisocial provision through provision of youth activity and scope.
There was the points, again, were relevant to reflect more on work done with partners. For example, Chair, you raised the issue around CCYP.
Yeah. Quite passionate about that.
There was, under Objective 3, Councillor Lucy Williams raised the point on equalities and expanding on that term, if we can. Again, under Objective 4 and on the active travel, there was the potential recommendations, members, if you agree, about greater reference to addressing the needs of people with disabilities and accessibility under that objective. And Rachel raised the point about putting further information on the section about what will be done by 2027 on active travel. Chair, you raised that point. And then that's it from me. Thank you, members, unless you have anything further to add to those.
Okay, are you happy with that? Any burning issues we haven't raised? Oh, well, please stop me. Right, the next date and times of next...
Sorry, Chair, just quickly.
Go on.
No, just to say, there's a member seminar on Monday, and that will be again on the county plan, so there'll be further opportunity to raise anything else that comes to you once you've had a chance to digest the latest version of the county plan. So the dialogue continues.
So we're going to see Neil's special, aren't we?
Sorry?
We're going to see Neil's special, aren't we? Right. Thank you for all the contributions. It's been really good. And, you know, we're here at 4:30, which says a lot. Right. I'm going to put... It's next week, isn't it? Yes. Not November. Is it the 8th of... whenever it is?
So just to remind members, there's another cross-cut-in next Wednesday afternoon.
What's the date?
That's looking at the strategic quality plan.
What's the date? I haven't got it with me.
12th.
So it's the 12th of October, next week, same place, looking at strategic equality, which, and look forward to seeing you here, either online or here. I've got to sit here. And thank you, everybody, for attending and contributing. As I said, it's a good bit of contributing, you know. Thank you very much indeed.